It was one of the rare days my husband John was off work during the summer. Engineering on a seasonal railroad brings with it long hours and little time for enjoyment, so I wanted to make sure he got some nice views. Today, we would try and further explore the area known by most of the locals as Patty Peak. John and I had nearly gotten his truck permanently stuck on the same road a few years ago, so this time we elected to take the several-mile-long hike on the dirt road. Patty Peak can be brutally cold. The winds gain momentum off the 27-mile-long Lake Bennett to the west and Touchey Bend to the east. The elevation of 7,200 feet gives it substantial exposure. Patty Peak is also known by Panacea, meaning the cure for all illness. This is an appropriate name for the largest peak along the Klondike Highway south of Carcross, Yukon Territory, Canada. By the time a person has arrived at the summit, all the things in the world below seem insignificant. On my first visit, it was a cold and windy day. The clouds obscured the peak, but the unique and desolate beauty of this area keeps it in the back of the mind of even the most discriminating hiker, and I was no exception. At the top of a seemingly endless four-wheeler road, the adventurous are rewarded with a massive terminal moraine of gray stone, variegated with rust-colored stream beds against fuchsia fields of river beauty. A glacial blue tarn lake cuts steep walls through the hanging glacier up above, and rock slides plummet from the jagged cliffs and strike the water hundreds of feet below with rhythmic frequency. The likelihood of the bone-chilling winds I'd experienced there before was a valuable exchange for the promise of ample vistas and a bouquet of alpine color. On this warm summer day, John, Nicole, Brian, and I set off to explore what we thought might be a small glacial lake in the bowl of the Patty Peak terminal moraine, but we had no idea we would spend the next 8 hours covering 15 miles on the mountain's challenging terrain, ascending a glacier, and finally summiting the massive peak. We parked near the highway and started up the 4-mile road to the lake. 2 miles up the road, the summer wildflowers were in full swing. Bluebells hung drying over the seasonal seeps on the hillside. Yellow bursts of arrow-leaf groundsel were everywhere, and rich veins of fireweed flashed magenta beside us. We kept a brisk pace as we made the 2,000-foot climb up the steep dirt road. It went by quickly, and the shade of the spruce forest and the lush ferns gave quickly away to an alpine landscape. A few abandoned frames stood at attention by the road, a glimpse of the area's vast mining history. Before long, there it was, Patty Peak. The area was heavy with clouds, but at that moment, it revealed the sharp crags of the mountaintop. It sat there stiffly, crumbling at the near vertical edges where the hanging glacier clung desperately, and narrow streaks of blue ice pointed another 3,000 feet to the lake below. John, Nicole, and I had been here before, and after some discussion, we headed to the left through the alpine field toward the massive pile of sharp rock that constituted the terminal moraine. The fields of river beauty were breathtaking, no taller than a pencil, but woven into a blanket that erupted like pink fireworks across the mountain. We slipped and stumbled our way up the crumbling pile of glacial tailings for another 30 minutes or so, until reaching the bowl at the foot of the moraine. As the clouds parted ahead of us, we were rewarded with another awe-inspiring view. Draped from peak to peak like a blue-white scarf, stained with brown strata and riddled with icy blue serpentine streams, loomed a massive glacier, a glacier we had been completely unaware of until now. We were instantly met with a bone-chilling wind at the foot of the glacier. It stung our exposed skin, and our fingers quickly went numb. Undeterred, and in fact with renewed energy from our find, we clambered eagerly toward the icy field, hats, gloves, and jackets piling on as we advanced. With excitement and some apprehension, we made our way over the icy waterfalls and deep cavernous runnels, traversing the foot of the glacier carefully. Ablation had left the glacier free of snow, with plenty of rock debris. Every cautious step was met with firm, rippled ice and gravel, which emboldened us to proceed further up the glacier. Finally, the slope began a sharp vertical rise. Without ropes or crampons, this was the farthest we could safely ascend the ice. After some discussion about the route options, a quick plan was agreed upon to test the integrity of the mountainside and explore the possibility of a glacier crossing from up above. Nearing the edge of the ice, I hesitated. Suddenly, I wished I had my helmet and my ice tool. There were obvious dangers in continuing upward over what appeared to be a supersaturated and melting mountainside. But to reach the top of that glacier, I took a breath and started up, digging my foot into the mud. The soft earth instantly gave way, water quickly engulfing my foot as it slid back down through the glacial muck. This was going to be a challenge. The first few steps were frantic and dysrhythmic as I struggled to make headway up the slope. Finally, reaching a shelf of crumbling rock, I began traversing laterally to decrease rockfall on the hikers below. The travel was slow and on all fours most of the time. Every other step let loose a small rocky mudslide which careened down the mountain and shattered as it hit the ice below. And just downslope, the earth under Brian's feet gave away, sending him in an uncontrolled slide 10 or more feet onto the glacier below. The mountain was a wet, slippery mass of melting ice and sharp rock, but we were too committed to turn around now. John and Nicole had stopped to wait for Brian to recover his lost elevation, but I was too close to stop. A few more awkward moves, and there it was, the top of the glacier. As I stood next to that incredible ice-draped bowl and scanned the top of the glacier, I suddenly realized there was no way for us to cross the glacier here. Not only was snow still carefully hiding unseen dangers below the surface, but a massive crevasse was forming between us and the other side of that glacier. Without the gear, we were in no state to attempt a crossing today. For a few minutes, I felt an overwhelming sense of defeat. Here we were, 5 miles in, 3,000 feet up, perched on a gravelly shelf only a few feet from what could have been an epic adventure with no way to proceed. I had a momentary pity party, and I wondered if the others were going to be disappointed. To be fair, it had been a pretty incredible hike. I was pretty wet and dirty, and just finding the glacier had been a bonus. As I struggled with my inner conflict, Nicole was coming over the ridge. "Check out that tower. Let's hike to it." Thick white clouds had been clinging fiercely to the peaks above us until right now. Nicole gestured a small hole that had appeared in the clouds. It was our first view of the peak since the terminal moraine, and there, perched on top like a missile silo, was the Panacea radio tower. The scree-covered mountainside looked steep and formidable, but after we all had a few minutes to digest the idea of hiking another hour or so up the vertical slope, we were off. There was more walking on all fours, but this time the shifting earth was dry, the rocks were larger and more angular, and despite being tired, we made good time. An hour or so later, we were on the ridgeline close to the summit. To our left was the rocky mountainside we'd just climbed up, and to the right, a sharp 2,000-foot vertical drop over a steep glacier right to the Tarn Lake below. It had been 4 hours, we'd climbed nearly 5,000 feet in elevation, and we had views in nearly every direction. A sea of clouds over Paddy Pass to the south. 5,500 feet below us to the west was the 27-mile-long Lake Bennett, which looked like a meandering river, and Touchai Bend was a similar sight to the east. Brian and I took in the views as John and Nicole each trundled a couple of large rocks towards the valley floor. The sound of breaking rock echoed through the valley as if the entire peak would collapse. Then, silence. The sun-bleached helipad was a perfect perch for lunch. The summit of a mountain has a way of making your problems insignificant and your life notably fragile. We lingered there, mostly in silence, watching the clouds engulf the valley to the west. When our bellies were full and we had adequately soaked up the sweeping views, we began the tedious descent to the valley floor below. Route finding was surprisingly easy. Nicole had studied the route beta and helped guide us. Before we knew it, we were trading our hikers for sandals and downing the last of our snacks in the car. 15 miles and over 8 hours in all. a perfectly unexpected day, we had all found our panacea. Except maybe for Brian, who lost most of the skin on all the knuckles of his toes and who may never go on an excursion with us again.